Hi, everybody. Welcome. I see some names I don't recognize in here, so welcome to you as well. And I see some names that I do recognize in here. Hi, Christine, Mitchie. Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for coming. All right, so it's already 1 o'clock, and this is hi, Laura. Hi, Laura. This is being recorded, as you probably all heard, as you're entering into our webinar. So I want to say, first of all, welcome to everyone to our monthly wellness webinar series. We are so glad that you can join us, especially for those of you who are busy during the day. I'm glad that you're making time to hang out with us live. If you're not joining us live, but you are part of the registration, the participants in the registration list, you'll receive a recording of this afterwards that you can watch on your own time. So this month, we are going to be focusing on heart health. In America, this is the monthly awareness topic for February. And as far as the webinars go that we put together, we love doing things like this because it really allows us the opportunity to offer a free option to share with you, educate you, inform you on a variety of topics. But as I was, when I do these things too, I also think as a person in the healthcare setting, as a healthcare provider or a practitioner, it really helps me also recommit to my own personal goals. I am only human. I deal with my own issues, my own conditions, my own complications. And so people in the healthcare world do tend to burn out and sometimes not necessarily lead or live by example. So whenever we put these webinars together, it helps me reinforce what I'm trying to do in my own life. I also want to acknowledge just the fact that, in America, I mean, really all over the world, but in America specifically, there are so many disparities and inequities that don't allow everybody the ability to implement the habits that we're going to be discussing today. So I just want to take a moment and just say, let's consider ourselves lucky that we are privileged enough to do so. So before we launch into our presentation officially, I want to give major props to Antoinette Marino, who is not only working with me in her role as a dietetic intern, but she is also a former student of mine. And she has come to be a friend as well. We've worked in a variety of different settings together in the last few years, and I have grown to love her. And that's going to be the theme of this discussion too, because Antoinette has, no pun intended or pun intended, put her heart and soul into researching the information for this webinar and creating all of the slides that you see here in front of you that you'll be seeing today. So before we go into the slides, let me just introduce myself for those who don't know me or are just starting to learn about me. My name is Dina D'Alessandro, and I've been a registered dietitian nutritionist for about 5 years or so. And I went back to school in 2013 as a second career. So an adult learner. I came from a background of having a Bachelor of Arts in Communication, and I ended up with a Master of Science in Nutrition. So if you know anything about those two worlds, it's like learning a whole new language. But I've been really fortunate to do a variety of things in my new role as a dietitian, including a lot of the things that you see here on this slide. And this is why I'm going to take a moment to toot my own horn. Even just in the last few years, I really believe that things like this, the opportunities, the experiences that I've gotten in the dietetics field have allowed me to consider myself kind of an expert in the field, or at least qualify me to present and counsel and work on topics like this. But I will say, we're always, those of us who want to grow, professionally develop, we are always learning. And in my case, I'm adjusting my approach based on things like current research and trends. And sometimes just conversations based on client and patient discussions and colleagues that I speak to as well, learning their best practices and opening my mind to a variety of different ways to best serve the population that I work with. So I know that a lot of our registrants are nutrition students, interns, or in the healthcare setting. So I look forward to your feedback at the end of this event. And for those of you who are considering working with a specialist like a dietitian, I hope this helps you get a little bit of a better feel as to the value that we can bring to the table. A lot of times I often say, if you're just working with a primary care provider, your main doctor, they might know a little bit about food and nutrition, or they might give you a very generic list of instructions, and then that's pretty much it, and you're off on your own. So I hope that this helps put your mind at ease, that those of us in what I consider to be the new generation of dietitians, we tend to take a multifactorial, realistic, and hopefully sustainable approach to how we work with our own clients. So I will now hand this over to Antoinette, and thank you again, Antoinette, for helping put this together.
Hi, everyone. My name is Antoinette, and I want to say a quick and big thank you to Dina for allowing me to speak with you all today and for facilitating these monthly webinars. They're always useful information, and they're good for people who are working on self-love, self-care, and everything in between. So a little about me. I am a current dietetic intern with the Complete Business Dietetic Internship, which is a distance program. I'm pursuing the RD credential as a second career after years in project management in the architectural industry. I also serve as the KBDI's student rep with the New Jersey State chapter of the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics. I completed my Bachelor of Science in Dietetics, Foods, and Nutrition at Lehman College, which is where I met Dina as a student in 2020. I'm also an entrepreneur. I established my business, Merino Nutrition, in 2019, where I provide basic nutrition education for healthy living and one-on-one wellness coaching. So now that you have a little info about me, let's get to the good stuff. First off, this session is being recorded again, and you guys will all receive a link to the recording by email once it's been processed. And we're going to also include a free downloadable worksheet to work on healthy habits. All participants' cameras and mics are currently muted. You will again be able to unmute for a live Q&A at the end of the presentation. And if you have questions in the meantime, feel free to put them in the chat box. We'll be checking on it as we go. A general disclaimer, the info we touch on in the presentation is intended for educational purposes. It is not medical advice. We strongly recommend seeking clearance from your own physician or primary healthcare provider before implementing any food or fitness changes mentioned here today. If you do have questions that come up after the presentation, feel free to email Dina using the contact info at the end of the presentation, or participate in the feedback survey you're going to receive in the follow-up email. Feedback is always welcome and appreciated. So let's get into an agenda. Our main objectives for today are to give you all some background on the inspiration for the Fit Fab Feb concept, to dive into the various heart conditions that impact so many of us, and to educate on risk factors for developing heart disease, as well as discuss prevention in the context of habit building and providing additional resources you can use on your own. Before we dive in, we want to get some feedback from you in the chat box. Feel free to share where you're tuning in from today. And if you're comfortable sharing with just a yes or a no, if you live with a diagnosed heart condition or you know somebody who does. All right, so Salma, I believe you're in Alabama, is that right? I think I know you're in the South. Okay, so we've got people all over. I'm in New Jersey. I do have family with heart conditions as well. So it looks like we've got people covered all over the place. And obviously the topic of heart health is something we all have some degree of personal connection to. So let's get into it now. Oh, yep, I see you. I see people in Westchester. That's where I'm from. Okay, awesome. All right, so let's get started here. February is American Heart Month. As a part of our efforts to increase awareness for heart disease and the risks, as well as encourage healthy habits, we hope to inspire you all to make this month a Fit Fab Feb, which I always struggle to say without stuttering. This means developing habits that celebrate your body and improve your health. When we think about all-encompassing health and wellness, we should talk about integrating the pillars of health. These are physical activity, nutrition, and sleep. A fourth and usually overlooked pillar of health is also mental well-being, and this includes a serious look at stress reduction when we're talking about heart health. I'm going to start with the difficult facts. Heart disease is the leading cause of death in the United States across genders and race. Heart disease kills more than cancer or COVID-19, an average of 659 deaths a year, or 1 in 4 deaths per year. Let's unpack it by identifying the heart conditions that are included under this umbrella term of heart disease. Hypertension or high blood pressure, which people are usually most familiar with since it's easy for physicians to check during a physical exam. Coronary artery disease, which is referred to as ischemic heart disease, is the hardening and narrowing of the arteries, which can restrict blood flow in the body. You may also hear the term atherosclerosis used to describe this. Stroke, sometimes abbreviated as CVA, a cerebrovascular accident, occurs when blood flow to the brain is disrupted, causing cell and tissue damage. Heart attack, also referred to as MI or myocardial infarction, occurs when the heart itself doesn't get enough blood flow, resulting in damage to that tissue. And congestive heart failure, or CHF, occurs when the heart itself is not pumping blood through the rest of the body as efficiently as it should be. And this is usually a progressive condition that may get worse over time. Well, that's a lot of heavy and distressing information. There is always hope. More than half of deaths from heart disease and stroke in people under the age of 65 are preventable. Good news is that treatments for heart conditions include highly effective medications and surgical procedures. And the better news is that we can prevent and reduce our risks of heart disease on our own with small lifestyle changes. The best way to set the stage for prevention is building awareness of the risk factors for developing heart disease. 3 of the most critical risk factors are high cholesterol levels in the blood, high blood pressure, and smoking. Close to half of Americans all live with at least one of these 3 conditions. Additional factors that can increase our risks are living with diabetes, excessive alcohol use, physical inactivity, and diet, particularly when we look at the acronym SAD. The SAD, or Standard American Diet, refers to any pattern of food intake with a high amount of refined carbohydrates, saturated fats, and sodium while being low in fiber. Let's take a look at how we can build better habits to reduce some of these risks. As I mentioned earlier, the pillars of health are the facets of our lives we can tweak to improve the quality of life and potentially reduce our risks of developing heart disease. This means we can work on integrating physical activity, nutrition, sleep, and mental health habits into our everyday lives. Dina and I are going to provide you with some suggestions on implementing new practices to reach goals that fall within these pillars of health. And this is how we can show ourselves some love. Physical activity is the first thing we're going to tackle. The phrase "keep it moving" can mean many things, and something worth stressing is that exercise does not need to look like it belongs on a Fitfluencer's Instagram feed. For the best heart health outcomes, it's recommended that people aim for 30 to 60 minutes of moderate intensity cardio exercise each day. This does not mean you need to run or be a CrossFit star. Cardio exercise can include brisk walks, hiking, cycling, swimming, rowing, or dancing. Beyond cardio, resistance and strength training can help our hearts too. 3 to 4 sessions weekly is the sweet spot for our best heart health outcomes. And this can look like body weight exercises, also called calisthenics, using resistance bands or even weights if you prefer them. Finding ways to move that bring you joy, can take the work out of this pillar of health. Stability and breathing practices are great forms of physical activity too, and these might include yoga, Pilates, and barre. Some tips for making the most out of the time we spend moving our bodies are to make it social and try to share some of this time with loved ones, and to fit short bursts of movement spread throughout your day if time feels tight, which it usually does. You can try for 3 10-minute breaks from your workspace to walk every day if that works for you, or you may find something else. You may find 2 15-minute bursts at the beginning and the end of a work day works. If you have a fitness tracker, and if you don't, if you can count your heartbeats manually with your fingers over your pulse over the course of a minute, knowing your target heart rate can help you identify when you've reached the right intensity of exercise. The ideal heart rate for exercise is 220 minus your age in years, and you want to find 70 to 85% of that number. So you can multiply that number by 0.7 to 0.85. For example, I'm 34 years old, so my target heart rate for exercise is 220 minus 34, which is 186, and then multiplied by 0.7 to 0.85 is 130 to 158 BPM, beats per minute. This gives me a decent range to aim for when I'm getting into a workout, and it also lets me know when maybe I need to slow down, because you don't want to go too far above that target heart range. This, as I mentioned earlier, getting to this heart rate that's a target for you is going to look different for everybody based on age and whatever their fitness level may be at the time. So you always want to check with your doctor before implementing new types of workouts that might be something you've never done before. The next pillar of health we can look at is nutrition. One of the key recommendations that RDs make to clients and patients is to always try to enjoy a variety of foods. Instead of focusing heavily on restricting or demonizing foods or food groups, our approach should always be additive and focus on finding nutrient-dense foods we enjoy working into meals and snacks every day. A key component to the nutrient density of a food is fiber. Consuming adequate dietary fiber can not only help our digestion, as most people know it to do, it can also reduce our risk of developing diabetes, as well as improve our cholesterol levels, both of which are risk factors for developing heart disease. Fiber intake recommendations for adults each day are 25 grams a day for women and 38 grams a day for men. And many people fall short of this by 10 grams or more every day. We can increase our fiber intake by eating more vegetables, more fruits, whole grain products, including breads, pastas, and cereals, as well as legumes and beans. When we're increasing our fiber intake, it's important to also be mindful that you want to increase your fluid or water intake so you can avoid any possible GI upset or constipation that might occur at first, and then your body gets a little more used to it. So it's not realistic to eliminate all processed or packaged foods from our daily diet, but we can improve our habits by increasing basic awareness on the content in the foods we do purchase. So looking at food labels, we can aim to purchase items with fewer added sugars, lower sodium content, and fewer saturated fats. So here's a basic nutrition label, at least the top piece of it. Added sugars can be listed as dozens of different ingredients, ranging from agave to dextrose and high fructose corn syrup. They're still all added sugars. So looking instead at the amount of grams of added sugars, which is going to be listed below the heading of total carbohydrates on the label, can help to eliminate confusion on determining the presence of sweeteners. Sodium is up next, as this can impact our blood pressure. The dietary approaches to stop hypertension, also called the DASH diet, recommends that people aim for a maximum intake of 1,500 to 2,400 milligrams of sodium per day. This is a great goal, but if you feel tripped up by counting that much of your intake and adding all those milligrams together all day, Dina has a really great recommendation for a shortcut on determining whether or not something has a healthy amount of sodium. So when you're looking at the nutrition label, if the milligrams of sodium per serving are less than or equal to 2 times the number of calories per serving, then the product has a generally acceptable amount of sodium. If you see a label where the milligrams of sodium is greater than 2 times the calories per serving listed, you might want to opt for something else, or at least limit that snack to once in a while. The label shown here has 160 milligrams of sodium per 230 calories. So it's actually a fairly low sodium item. If the sodium content on here said 460 milligrams or above, then we might want to try something different. Saturated fats are another thing we can be mindful of when thinking about our heart health, and this will be listed below the total fat content on the nutrition label. The American Heart Association recommends that saturated fat intake in the diet be below 7% of total calories consumed per day, which works out to about 15 grams a day if you eat around 2,000 calories. You can reduce your saturated fat intake by limiting red meat in your diet, reducing intake of full fat dairy, and opting for vegetable and seed oils rich in mono and polyunsaturated fats instead of something like coconut oil, butters, or lards, which are going to be much higher in saturated fats. Now that we've covered those basics on label reading and dietary habits, let's talk about behavioral tips in nutrition. Above all, we want to foster a positive relationship with food, reducing feelings of guilt or anxiety when eating certain foods, avoiding restriction of foods you really love to eat, and focusing instead on that additive approach of simply increasing intake of nutrient-dense foods can start the process of having a much healthier nutrition mindset. Setting realistic, manageable, time-specific goals in small steps can help us develop a lifestyle rather than an unsustainable slash and burn effort to overhaul our bodies or our health. We can encourage ourselves to develop healthier eating habits by planning meals and snacks that fit our budgets, fit our schedules and food preferences, and by enjoying food socially, making room for meals that are a part of our culture, and making sure to enjoy the journey of exploring new foods as we go. With 2 of our pillars of health covered, I'm going to turn it over to Dina to continue from here.
Thank you, Antoinette. I'm just quickly also checking the chat box. I don't see anything else coming up in here. And again, just to reiterate, if you don't want to wait until the end of the presentation for questions, you can also throw those into the chat if you are kind of taking notes as you go, and we will address them at the end of the webinar. So our next pillar, this is something that I cannot stress enough the importance of, which is sleep. I also think this is probably something that a lot of people I know, myself included, do struggle with. And we are learning more and more through research studies, the complications that can occur due to poor sleep quality and quantity. Some of the things that can affect our sleep or cause insomnia are things like already having an existing chronic disease, associated pain that goes with that, things like arthritis, gastrointestinal issues, sleep apnea, restless leg syndrome, among others. Certain medications might also have some side effects that can throw off quality sleep, different hormonal issues going on, like during pregnancy or during premenstrual syndrome or menopause can also affect sleep quality and quantity. Stress is actually considered to be the #1 cause of short-term sleeping difficulties. And I said earlier that I know a lot of our registrants today are students or interns, and there's no shortage of school-related stressors and pressures, especially when I know some of you are pulling all-nighters, staying up and studying for your exams. But of course, in addition to that, there are also other stressors that can come from outside of a school environment, or if you're not in a school environment, like family, relationship, job issues, problems, and financial concerns as well. Also, something that we don't really talk about a lot too, or consider a lot in these discussions, are things like night shift workers. Night shift work, or having not necessarily a traditional work schedule, might also mess with your biological rhythms, because you're forcing your body to stay up during times of the day that most people are asleep. And I'm not sure how many of us are traveling these days, but if we are going off for long journeys, things like jet lag from crossing across many time zones in a short period of time could also deprive you of good sleep until your body returns back to that normal time zone. Other habits and activities may also interfere with getting a good night's sleep, such as smoking and drinking alcohol or consuming caffeine close to bedtime. And some people, while they enjoy exercising later in the day, they can find that anything that might be a little bit too stimulating can mess with their bedtime or keep them awake. Keeping an erratic morning and nighttime schedule might also cause some difficulties too, as do mentally intense activities at night or right before getting into bed. And of course, if you're anything like me, scrolling on our screens, or really any kind of distracting sleep environment, such as a room that's too hot, too cold, too much light, too noisy, can definitely mess with your sleep system. And when you're not getting enough sleep, not getting a restful night's sleep, at least as a pattern, right? So once in a while, okay, you got to pull an all-nighter, or you're suffering from insomnia because they have a lot going on, that might not be such an issue. But if you see this becoming a pattern, you may end up finding more long-term and serious health problems arise, such as things like high blood pressure and stroke, which is leading to this whole heart discussion, diabetes, depression, impairment in your immune system, lower sex drive as well. And what we've come to see too is earlier onset cognitive decline. So Parkinson's disease, Alzheimer's, dementia, very closely related to sleep deprivation. So I really encourage you, and we'll talk a little bit more in the slides to come about integrating some helpful habits, but I encourage you to take a look at what your sleep habits are right now. If you can make one or more of the following changes starting within the next week, please try to do so. Talking about keeping a consistent wake time, regardless of the day of the week, that's something that your body would get used to. Putting away the screens at the end of the night, or at least shutting things down at a certain time before you're about to go to bed. Making time for rest, making time for downtime, including things like short naps during the day, if you can afford to do so, limiting those to about 15 to 30 minutes, or at least giving yourself a brain break. Because if you're anything like me, it's go, go, go all day long. I get to bed and then the brain starts going, oh, I forgot to do this, I forgot to do that. And I just cannot get my mind to be quiet. And then creating for yourself a comfortable and consistent bedtime routine that works for you. So maybe that includes doing some light stretching or yoga movements to, kind of quiet and calm the body down. Reading a chapter of a book, maybe having some tea at the end of the evening, or doing a journaling or a brain dump. Again, trying to empty out that mindset before you are ready to hit the hay could be kind of helpful too. And along that note, especially when it comes to the stress factor and how we can ease ourselves out of those stressful situations, we really encourage you to do your best to focus and be present in the moment as best as possible. It might seem easier said than done, because we live in a go, go, go society where everything is super fast and super convenient. But I always think back to one of my favorite quotes from the late great basketball coach, John Wooden, which is, if you don't have time to do it right, when will you have time to do it over? So when you're doing something like that brain dump activity the night before, maybe you can turn that into a full 15-minute or 20-minute planning section for the next day for yourself. And that could be looking at your schedule. It could be, you don't see it behind me here, but my bedroom door is off to my side, where I actually lay out my clothes on my door for the few days to come up, kind of get rid of that friction that's going to be happening. Prioritize any of your top tasks. See where you might have time in your schedule for that downtime that we mentioned for yourself. And if you do end up having, which happens, these back-to-back really busy days, PS, sirens outside. It's New York City. I apologize for the background noise. And there might be things that you can delegate or move or reschedule so that you can take care of your health. Take a look at that too, and literally block time as if you have a meeting with yourself to do that. We've also heard that old adage that, you can't pour from an empty cup. So if you are one of those people who thinks I can go on 4 hours of sleep, I don't have time to take care of myself, I'll relax whenever I get all of these things that have to get off my plate done. When is it that you're going to make time to replenish? And when are you spending time, that quality time, socializing with your friends and family who might want to see you, might want to spread love in that way? And then, just as a reminder, this is a great time to talk about it too at the beginning of every year. Remember to schedule your yearly or annual medical exams. Maybe you're also considering this time around to go to different specialists or going into therapy, or maybe even scheduling for yourself a spa day. Considering the current climate that we have right now with the pandemic and the protocols, it might take a little bit longer than you plan or expect to get those appointments scheduled. So do what you can when you can. Try to space things out. It's possible you might call a doctor now, but they might not be able to see you until March. So always keep that in front of mind, and just remember that taking care of yourself is not a luxury. This is a responsibility that I believe we all have for ourselves. Now, for the first time ever, I'm very happy to announce that we have decided to include a discussion about money in our webinar, because financial stress is also one of the top stressors that can also lead to things like hypertension and causing risk factors for heart disease and other chronic conditions as well. Plus, honestly, I believe, especially in the health and wellness world, in our professions, and with a lot of the students and interns that are watching this, we really need to normalize talking about money and salaries and budgets. And I think this is also perfect timing if, like me, you're starting to think about doing your taxes. So maybe you have things already in order, you're looking at your paperwork, and you have some of your past tax returns out, pay stubs, etc. This might be a good time to spend a couple of hours or maybe a half of a day if you need to start planning out what's really working and not working for you financially. So are you living outside of your means? Can you consider applying our recommendations here that we mentioned with that 50-30-20 method? This is actually something that Antoinette brought to my attention, and I had not really seen in that way before. So taking a look at what you even think or know of to be your overall income, and looking at that breakdown of spending a certain percentage on certain things and putting a certain percentage away if you're able to do that. And like myself included, having returned back to school, having had some, not necessarily loans, but financial obligations to catch up on, it definitely might take some time to get to the point where you feel comfortable. And I know that we might not be able to make immediate changes with our finances. Things, might have to come and go in that way before we can start applying some of these guidelines. But especially if you're paying out of pocket for things like your school, your tuition, or you're investing in things like you're trying to get certified in something, or perhaps you are working on professional development things like going to conferences or leadership programs that will hopefully pay you back later, have a return on investment later in your life. But what are things that you can maybe cut back on now? Are there subscriptions or membership fees or dues that are coming close to renewal? I can say yes for sure on my end. I know that is a fact that you can maybe let go of. These things that I'll get to it. I promise I'm going to make use of that, and you're really not. Can you get rid of that? Can you contact your bank, your credit card companies, your utility companies, and maybe negotiate some lower terms on things like that? Or if you are somebody who has to spend a certain amount, can you find bargains or deals for things that you purchase regularly? I know right now is not the greatest time, even for food shopping. A lot of the prices are going up exponentially. So maybe you invest in a membership to a big box store and you get some deals in that sense, or you keep an eye out for seasonal products or any kind of specials or coupon cutting, things that might help kind of ease the financial strain if possible. And with any of our webinars, what we love to do, like Antoinette had mentioned, is give you a plan of action. We really think it's important not just for us to be spewing this information out, and maybe you are or are not taking notes with all of this stuff, but we love kind of giving you a visual representation of what how we think you might be able to implement some of these habits that we review today. So of course, we encourage you to take a look, like I said before, at your own schedule. Take a look at what tomorrow for the next 4 weeks look like in your calendar. And are there certain things that you can go through and add a little bit? So again, you can mix and match and pick and choose whatever you see in front of you. If you want to take a screenshot of this right now, that's fine, but this is actually going to be a part of our free downloadable attachments that we'll send out after the event within the next few days or so, or maybe by next week, the latest. So for example, right, today is, what's today? Today's Wednesday. Today's Wellness Wednesday. So if I want to let the rest of the week ride out, that's fine. But maybe I might want to make a change immediately. Maybe tomorrow, the first thing I do is get up and I say, I'm going to do 10 to 15 minutes of some sort of physical activity. Or maybe I set a reminder every few hours that I just want to get up and stretch or move around a little bit. If I'm the kind of person who, I know a lot of us are, can sit and just kind of zone out in front of the computer for many hours on end. Or maybe I'm going shopping over the weekend for my groceries, and now this is the time that I'm going to start being a little bit more conscientious, and maybe I make a plan to add some vegetables or some fibrous foods to just one meal every day for the next week. So that first week, you can take a look at some of those few small things that you might want to add. And again, we gave you a little bit of an example from every one of those pillars that you can pick and choose from, but maybe you start even smaller than that. And just to reiterate what Antoinette mentioned earlier, you're talking about setting up what we call these SMART goals. Are they specific enough that you can achieve them? Are they realistic enough for you to be able to integrate them into your day-to-day schedule? And are they time sensitive? So you see, we have numbers that apply to everything. Within the next few days, within the next week, I will do 15 minutes of this, or I will take one meal. So try to be really specific as you possibly can, with the end goal of supporting your overall health, increasing your optimum health, and reducing your risk of any heart diseases. And then so here in the next week to come, in week 2, again, whatever that means to you, if that's the end of February or you're going to start in March, maybe you add on a little bit more. Maybe you start swapping out a few things, being a little bit more mindful of your food habits. Maybe you venture off as it gets a little bit warmer and sunnier as the days progress out into the sunlight, which is exactly what I'm doing. The second we are done here, I am taking a walk around the block, or at least sitting near an open window just to get the sunlight on your face. Maybe this is also the time too, as you're preparing for your taxes, you start looking at that income and those expenses, and you start seeing if you can set up a budget in whatever way that means or makes sense to you. Maybe that's something that you're responsible for your own self, or you have family members or other people that you have to consider doing the budgeting. So you include them in on that conversation. And of course, maybe you spend some time. I have this in my calendar. I am nerdy enough. I keep everybody's birthdays and anniversaries in my calendar, but I also try at least 3 times a week just to text random people alphabetically in my contacts, just to say I'm thinking of you and I hope you're doing well and I'd love to catch up soon. So maybe send a quick text or a phone call to somebody that you haven't talked to in a while. Then in week 3, you're building on those habits, right? So you're getting the things that you've had in weeks 1 and 2, and they've become a little bit more easier to do as the time progresses. And maybe now your fitness, you're increasing your intensity, your duration, or your frequency to whatever your routine is. Maybe now you're being a little bit more savvy as you go shopping and taking a look at those labels and deciding, maybe I'll forego the added sugars and I can doctor something up at home. Or maybe I'll choose a lower sodium option and I can use other kinds of seasonings in the foods that I'm eating and making at home. Also, sleep habits too, which I didn't talk about in the first 2 weeks there, but maybe you apply some sort of routine to that as well. I was telling Antoinette earlier, I have like a whole really super sexy contraption that just goes all over my head. I've got a sleep mask and a headset, and I'm listening to either music or soft sounds or a timer of some kind of guided meditation, or sometimes I'll do what's called yoga nidra, where you do like a compression and relaxation of all your muscles. And that's something that I find before the timer even shuts off that I'm out like a light. So these are things that you can hopefully, again, they might not be exactly applicable to what your situation is right now, but hopefully you're getting some ideas of what you might want to implement, so that by week 4, it takes a while to build a habit. And these might be things that last you long term, or just kind of get you kickstarted to move into a new direction where you're either adding or subtracting habits in your current lifestyle. And then by week 4, now you've built that foundation where you can try out a new workout routine. I love the free stuff. I mean, I was gonna say I belong to a gym, which is true. I pay money for a gym. That is true. I don't necessarily go to the gym sometimes, but I do my best to at least make use of it once a week so that I know I'm getting somewhat of my money's worth. But I also do things like free fit apps and YouTube videos, or my gym actually has an app to it as well. So sometimes they'll do like, an ab exercise or a daily yoga instruction thing, and we can cater that to whatever your lifestyle is. Maybe you do a low impact 15-minute thing, like Antoinette mentioned earlier, twice a day. And now that means that you've gotten up twice more than you did in past weeks. Setting up payment plans, trying to get your credit card debt under control if that's an issue for you. And then also reflecting. This is something that I think is really important, but somewhat overlooked. And for those of you who do this, you can throw in the chat if this is a habit that you have: gratitude. I know I am very hard on myself. I often look at my pages and pages of all my to-do lists going, I haven't gotten done with that. I'm freaking out. This thing's piling up, but I never stop and think about what I'm grateful for. So my resolution for this year, in front of me, I have my planner, and I actually keep track on days of the month that things, like even just like the first snowfall or going out to brunch with somebody, I just make notes of that. And this way, at the end of the month, when when I'm looking back on things, if I feel like I need to be hard on myself for not doing something or not having accomplished something, I can actually look down and say, that was a really fun month. Like, I got to go back to school and be in class with people and see human beings in 3D world again. So spending a few minutes a day, or however often you want to, just reflecting on certain things. Yeah, thank you. Thanks for those of you who are chiming in. Thank you. Appreciate that. So this also chimes in, and yes, I'm going to do a shameless plug here, because just like I said with the past slide, we want to make sure we're giving you an action plan. And I am currently, with my interns and some of my students, we've been, oh gosh, it feels like the last year, we've been working on trying to set up and provide an affordable or low cost option for anyone who's interested in working with a specialist. I am a dietitian. I have a private practice, but I consider that private practice very part-time in the true way that people define it, as if like, you're going to meet with me virtually in a session, not necessarily in an office, but having counseling sessions with me. So what ends up happening is that I don't have a ton of time set aside for one-on-one sessions every week. So a lot of people who want to work with me either get put on a wait list, or find out that I have unlimited availability, and that kind of bums me out a little bit too. So what I thought was the next best thing is to offer these more affordable, or hopefully low cost options, where you don't have to commit to working with me on a one-on-one way. That I can still provide support with you by sharing information, education, and guiding you, much like a self-paced class would kind of be. Like every week you get a little bit of a module or some guidance or a recorded lecture or a video, something just to kind of guide you along to help you know that there's support there. Some of these things that we're working on may come with like a WhatsApp group or a Slack app group, so that you can talk amongst yourselves with anybody else in these programs. And there is no commitment for you to stay on more than just the month or whatever it is that you need. So we're coming up with different topics like we did today. There's probably going to be a heart healthy discussion. We are working on some women's health things too, like menopause, like your girl here is going through. So any support that you're looking for in the changes that are coming with those hormonal changes as through that life cycle, that's going to be something else too. So I really highly recommend, if this is something that you would consider, it's $28 for 28 days. So it covers those 4 weeks for you to help build a habit. If you know anybody who might be interested in things like this too, just keep an eye out. I'm not ready to launch any of these things just yet. We're still working on them, but in the future, and also based on your feedback of topics you would be interested in, that we would create these things for you, and you kind of just pay as you go, or you just pay the one time and work with us for that 1 month. And at least I can be able to provide some service on a larger scale, and then also have people who can support each other through that kind of group dynamic. So I hope that that's kind of interesting to everybody, if you think that is. In the meantime, you can follow me/us across all the social media platforms. However, I'm really only like kind of really on Instagram. I probably have a handle on every single platform ever, but I'm not as active on any of those things as much as I am on Instagram. Some Facebook stuff, some Twitter as well. And I do have a YouTube channel where I actually do put up a lot of these webinars once they are published, and also some little mini educational videos that I have on there too. So you can also contact me via email or DM me on any of those social media platforms. But I just want to disclaim again, I'm a dietitian, not your dietitian. So I might not be able to answer or go too into detail with whatever you are looking to gain as far as information is concerned. So if that's the case, on the follow-up email, I'll be sending out a link where you can schedule a 15-minute consultation with me just to make sure we're a right fit and see if there's a way that you want to move forward either through those online programs or with a one-on-one counseling session with me. So I'm always trying to figure out how I can best help everybody. And I hope that's helpful to know that. So in our post-event email, as well as Antoinette mentioned at the beginning, you'll get a recording link to this webinar if you came in late or you're not able to attend live. You'll also get a feedback survey. Right. I think it's so important. Please, it only takes 10 minutes. Just please give as much feedback as you can. And then you'll also get those free downloadable resources. And also some of the information we mentioned today, we'll put some links in as well that you can click on and get those resources to help you get those helpful habits in order as soon as you possibly can. So on that note, let me just check the chat. Oh, thank you, Leah. Thank you. So sweet. Let me check the chat. And if you do have any questions, you can now raise your hand, or if you want to open up your mics, I'm going to scroll through the chat here just to see if anybody has chimed in. Oh, thank you, Venice. You're so sweet. Awesome advice. Gratitude practice, Antoinette. Thank you. Oh, great. Alta gracia. Thank you so much. Yeah, exactly. Right. So you don't necessarily have to have a condition. The whole point is try to be preventative. This is also the issue sometimes with health insurances, and the reason why I'm having some issues with who I should and shouldn't take and how long it takes to get credentialed with certain panels. Sometimes you have to have a diagnosis or you have to be sent to me by a doctor. And in doing so, I have to chart you accordingly. Like I have to keep track of a diagnosis for you. Some insurance companies will offer preventative services, but like I said, if you're not able to spend money out of pocket to work with a specialist one-on-one, then see if there are options like that. A lot of my colleagues have programs and packages that they put together, same thing as I do as well, where I feel like it's a little bit more affordable. And then I can spread myself out a little further by sharing information and kind of sending it out to the masses. You're very welcome, everybody. And let me see if there's anybody who's waiting in the wings here. No hands are raised. All right, so it looks like we've covered everything. Antoinette, on your end, is there anything that I forgot to talk about, or did we cover everything, or anything else that you wanted to add?
I think we got a lot. We do have some extra resources, I think, that people are going to get links to as well in that email that comes as a follow-up. And I just want to thank you all for tuning in and hanging out with us to learn a little bit about prevention. And it was great to speak with you all.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. As a reminder, next month is March. So in the email, I'll tell you what the date is, but I think it's the second Wednesday of every month. So next month is March. It's one of the favorite months of all time for dietitians because it's National Nutrition Month, and we're going to be talking about cultural foods and maybe trying out different kinds of things that you might not have heard of before, and also integrating the global aspect to that. And then in April, or I think May, is Women's Health Month. So May is when we're going to talk about the menopause discussion. I can't remember what April is, but I'll send everybody out in the follow-up email what our next set of wellness webinars are. And I hope you can join us again for that, or at least register and get the recording link if you can't show up in person. So thank you so much, everybody. It's been a true pleasure. And thank you again to Antoinette for putting all of this together for us. I hope you found it enjoyable and educational. Bye, everybody. Have a wonderful rest of the week. Please eat well, treat yourselves well, and sleep well too. Bye, everybody.